Happy Sunday, Tampa Bay. Andrew Duncan with the Duncan Duo team at LPT Realty, back for another week of the Duncan Duo Real Estate Show, starting off March 1st today. I am excited to have a couple of our partners on the show today. Melissa Rodriguez with Citywide Home Mortgage, as well as Wade Sweikel with Two College Brothers Moving. I had an awesome trip in Europe. I went to Paris and Spain. So I'm kind of back and refreshed on the plane ride home. I've been to Spain a bunch, but this was my second trip to Paris. The first time I went was about 12 years ago, and I had a really bad experience. I did not enjoy Paris. I came home thinking that Parisians just must hate Americans. They must not like us, right? This time on my trip, I had a massively different experience. I loved Paris. Everyone was super nice. I had no one hating on me. And it made me realize, on the plane ride home, I kind of figured out what the difference was. And the difference was 12 years ago, I stayed in crappy, cheap hotels and went to crappy, cheap restaurants and looked for the discount and tried to buy on price, right? And it made me realize kind of the similarities that people, buying the most expensive thing that they're ever going to buy, a house, selling the most expensive thing they're ever going to sell. The similarities of that experience that I had by going cheap is rampant in real estate. So many customers have a bad real estate experience, but it's their own fault because they pick the cheap people. Mm-hmm. They pick the cheapest agent. They pick the cheapest mortgage. They pick the cheapest mover. And then they have this horrible experience and they have stuff gets broken and the closing doesn't happen. And the lender lied to them about this fee and their taxes were wrong. And all the while, not wanting to accept the responsibility of, hey, maybe you shouldn't have gone with the cheap guy. Cheap work ain't good and good work ain't cheap is a quote I've heard from a mentor for years. And so I'm happy to have you both on today because I think you guys are the best of the best. And the best of the best isn't cheap. You do get what you pay for. And Wade, we've talked about this a lot. You've shared some of the stories of the pickup truck movers and the guys that'll break your stuff and hold your stuff hostage when they want to upsell you because they quoted you some ridiculous number they knew they couldn't meet. And then they get to moving you in and they say, oh, we underestimated. You owe us another $1,000. And you're like, oh, no, I don't. Well, yeah, you do because your stuff's in my truck. Like how often you guys hear those experiences. And a lot of times it's just consumers being cheap. And then the experience is horrific because they tried to cut corners with the cheapest guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had a very similar Europe experience. I went in college, stayed at hostels, and it was okay. It was an eye-opening experience to be able to see other cultures. But I recently also went to Paris, and last summer for my mom's 70th birthday, I took her out there, and
that's awesome.
We didn't really cut any corners.
Yeah.
We stayed at hotels instead of hostels, of course.
You stayed at nice places, and you went to maybe a little bit more. And again, I'm not saying I didn't go like crazy. Like right. I just didn't look for the cheapest, right? And so many consumers, they're always looking for the cheapest. And, we had an experience not long ago with a client that moved. And, we said, hey, look, you guys got to use this mover. It's our preferred mover. And they said, oh, well, we quoted, and this company was a little bit cheaper. Yeah. And then like weeks later, they're like, we had such a horrible experience. We left them a bad review and blah, blah, blah. And they did this and they did that. Well, yeah. Because you went with the cheap person. You went to Chick-fil-A and expected Ocean Prime.
Yeah.
And look, I love me some Chick-fil-A. I go there a lot, but it ain't the same experience as Ocean Prime.
No, it's not. And I think it's important. There's certain things in life that are commodities, and there's certain things that if you're going to do it, you might as well do it right and bite the bullet and spend just a little bit extra money in order to get a good quality experience. Travel is definitely one of them, but so is home services.
Yeah.
We see it all the time. It's probably the number one reason we don't book a job is because somebody found a cheaper price. And I was recently just talking to somebody who had a very small move last week, and it was a friend of mine, hadn't talked to in probably a year or two, but she was moving, and she said this other company said $500 over the phone. And I was like, how could they just say $500 over the phone?
There's no way they could know
without
that.
Seeing it. And I knew firsthand where she lived, long hallways, elevators. I was like, there's no way. And they're like, yeah, they're sending 3 guys out for $500. They just said that over the phone. I'm like, okay, let's look them up online. Let's see if they have a license. I go to the Florida Department of Agriculture Consumer Services mover license lookup. They're not licensed. Their SunBiz said they're out of Fort Myers. It's like, how are they helping somebody in Tampa Bay if they're based out of Fort Myers? So there's a lot of those red flags, and I always encourage consumers, if they get a offer that's too good to be true, it probably is.
Oh, 100%.
Look those things up because it's expensive to do business right.
And again, like someone moving their stuff, this is your stuff. I mean, like, what's more valuable? It's like, this is your stuff.
Yeah.
Like,
and it's crazy.
It's important to you.
People go spend $20,000-$30,000 on furniture,
and then they'll pay some cheap guy, and the cheap guy messes it up.
Exactly.
Like, we literally we deal with it all the time. It's like, oh, who did you hire? Did you hire the company that we recommended? Oh, no, we didn't. Oh, well, then there's really nothing I can do to help you. Like, unfortunately, like, you went with the cheap guy, and that's what you get. There's also, again, kind of going back to it's too good to be true. We deal with this in the mortgage space, right, Melissa? You'll get a customer that'll come in and they'll get quoted this insanely low rate or this insanely low payment. Yep. And then, when push comes to shove, when it gets close to closing, the tax proration was wrong.
Right.
The insurance proration was wrong. Oh, to get that rate now, because the lender was booking too many loans because they're in a call center and they never locked your rate. So they lied to you. Oh, but now you've got to put a bunch of money down to buy your rate down to get that rate. Like, so many mistakes because you went with the cheap person. I mean, this is a mortgage you're going to be with for up to 30 years. No one really 30 years, but you're going to be with it for a long time. Maybe you should pick somebody that knows what they're doing, that isn't the one that's going to cut the corners and be the cheapest.
Right. Yeah. And just come in and have a chat with us. We're on your team. It's a relationship. It's not always the cheapest rate. Let me look at your monthly payment. Maybe you're comfortable paying a little bit higher rate, or maybe there's just different strategies that we look at, but we're a team that cares, not just somebody that, is just going to take your application and move you on to the next, department and never talk to you again.
Yeah.
We're together from start to finish. So
I think again, when you do get that person that's looking only on the numbers and they're coming to you and saying, well, this company's quoting some rate, and you're like, I have no idea how they're pulling that off. It's probably not real. It's a bait and switch, or there's some sort of massive prepayment, or you've got to buy the rate down, or there's something wrong there. And again, the cheap people are operating at a different level of service. We talked about this before. My trip, for example, the cheap hotel isn't necessarily, they're just turning people over. They're just turning stuff over. They're volume shop. They don't really care if you're happy. They're going to win business by being the cheapest. The service is going to be bad. The experience is going to be bad. So the mortgage lender that's the cheap one isn't going to return your phone call. They're going to provide bad service.
They're not going to work the weekends.
They're not going to close on. You know how many times I've seen people lose their dream home because the lender didn't get it done on time because they were a volume shop working only on mass units to be able to make it work. And then the deal falls apart and you lose your dream house because you went with the guy that was quoting you a quarter point lower, that was dishonest, and then had too much business, couldn't provide good service.
Correct.
It's rampant.
Real estate, moving, it's a relatively low barrier to entry to get into it. And I think a lot of people look at these businesses like commodities, and they just think that, it's all going to be the same at the end of the day. Let me just try to find the cheapest possible thing. But it's just simply not the case. I mean, I can speak for moving more than real estate, but I mean, if you want to have licensed, insured, background check people, you drug test your movers, you have workers' compensation, you have a support staff that can actually work together to get it done, rather than just bottleneck at one owner who's also on the trucks trying to take down the notes on the phone while they're driving, to their next job. That's going to be a way different experience at the end of the day than somebody who has an office team where this person's handling the move coordination, this person's scheduling the movers, this person's hiring and training the movers, this person's checking in with you throughout the process, 7 days in advance, the day before, to confirm. They're calling during the move. They're checking in after the move to address any issues that may have arose so that they can make those right. You see a lot of these one-man band shops that they just can't do that. They don't have the bandwidth to be able to scale that.
And here's what, and I can't say this on air, but I call it called a poop sandwich. Okay. When you have a business like yours or like mine and like ours at Citywide, where you have a lot of reviews, right? You've had a lot of happy customers. I've got 1,500 and something. You've got gobs of reviews too, right? Like, we're one of the best reviewed businesses in Tampa, and it's because we do a great job for our customers and we care about making things right. And when you do have a business like that, and when you're not just operating at the cheapest discount possible you can, you also can provide post-closing support. You can resolve problems. You can help them recover something. For the guy that's the cheapest, that's cutting corners on insurance, when he breaks your mom's china plate, there's nothing standing behind him to fix that. Like at our company, if something goes wrong, like, we want you to come back to us. We're going to try and make that right. The guy that's shopping on price doesn't have any margin to make anything right. So when something goes south, you're SOL. Nothing's getting done. Your problem's not getting solved. And so I think that kind of brought me to this idea or a conversation I had this week a real estate agent with a different company ran into a problem, and a bad problem, and is worried about getting sued and probably will get sued. And unfortunately, this real estate agent went to the company that is like the discount of all discount. Like, they're not paying much. That broker really isn't benefiting financially from helping them. And so when they went to their broker to say, hey, what am I going to do? And they're like, you're on your own. And that's the reality of what happens in businesses when a business isn't operating from a place where it can provide good service, where it wants to provide good service, where it cares about its reputation, where it has enough business to earn a profit to be able to solve problems. There's nothing wrong with someone earning a profit in their business. And if they're not, then guess what? When you do have a problem because you went with the cheap guy, you're stuck solving it because they don't have a means to help you.
You want whoever you work with to be profitable because that means they're going to be in it for the long haul.
Right.
You want somebody who's going to be motivated
100%.
to take care of as many clients as possible for as long a period as possible and not just trying to make a quick buck or is desperate for the business. So they're willing to lose money on that business to get it. I see it all the time in home services and moving where owners don't know their numbers and they just throw out prices to try to beat the next guy down the street who also does it.
But then they're losing money.
Exactly.
Right. On the mortgage side of it too, again, kind of going back to the service level, customers so often aren't factoring that in and they're looking only at the rate and the cost. And what happens is then by the time they finally get into the house, they're so frustrated that they hated the experience, but it was all because they went with the cheap person. The service, the experience, and then the ability to actually close is another important one.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, we strive to close, get a clear to close early, at least a week ahead of time.
And you guys do a great job with that.
And like how we're talking right now, it's not just about mortgage. I mean, it's about the connections that we have to offer.
Correct. Referrals to different people, to solve problems, to fix credit,
with all fantastic reviews. Like I wouldn't think twice about sending somebody to, and you not doing a good job. I know that your company would do. You're so reputable. You have amazing reviews. So I would send whoever, my daughter to you. I would feel super comfortable. Same with you, Andrew, and your team. So I think that's more to offer than just the regular, call center.
And I'm glad you bring that up, like feeling comfortable around the people that you're working with, because good people are going to expect to get paid more. In order to attract the best talent to
you're gonna have to pay
them. You have to pay them a little bit more, or else you don't know who you're going to get. It could be somebody who's desperate for a job that just came out of the penitentiary doing